Hi there and welcome to Inside the Studio. I'm Evan Sanford. Thanks so much for tuning in today. We've got a great program for you. My very special guest today is Lieutenant Colonel Billy Pope. He is a 2001 University of Redlands graduate and currently works at the Pentagon as the Chief of the Cyber Strategy Branch at the U.S. Air Force Headquarters. Lieutenant Colonel Billy Pope, welcome to the program. Thanks for being here.
It is absolutely my pleasure to be here. Thank you.
When did you know you wanted to be in the military?
I grew up in a family that really valued public service. My dad was a police officer. My grandfather was a battalion chief in a fire department. And so I really I grew up with an atmosphere that really valued your contributions to the community and contributions to the nation. And so I knew from an early age that I was going to go into some type of public service. But it wasn't until probably high school where I started to entertain options of going into the military. They offered money for college, which became a pretty important piece as I was looking at the University of Redlands. And so I accepted a scholarship with the Air Force prior to graduating high school. And I brought that scholarship here to the U of R, knowing that I would be headed into the Air Force upon graduation from here. So it was certainly something that was put together at a young age, but then also came together over the 4 years here at U of R. And I would argue that, really for people who join the military, you join twice, right? Once is when you sign the paperwork that says, yes, I'm going to become a member of the military. The second time is when you buy in to the concepts of protecting your nation, the responsibilities that come with the position of being an officer in the Air Force, and the institution that is national defense. And so when you make that conscious decision to buy in as a profession, then you really do kind of join again, if you will. And so that came at a point later after I had already started in the Air Force.
When you first joined the Air Force, what kinds of responsibilities did you have?
Yeah, so as a college graduate and an ROTC student when I was here at the university, I joined the Air Force as an officer. So I went in as a second lieutenant, and that's the most junior rank of the officer ranks. And so your responsibilities there are kind of a blend of technical responsibilities, leveraging the education that you received at a university, particularly in communications and computer science. So you want to bring those technical skills and aptitudes to the job, but also leadership opportunities. And so as a young, 22-year-old right out of college, I was leading airmen in the execution of their duties and putting those together at the Air Force Flight Test Center at Edwards Air Force Base. That was my first assignment. And so we were working on experimental aircraft and providing the communication services for those aircraft and making sure that they had what they needed to move out.
And how did you work your way up?
Over 15 years, I've been promoted several times, but I can say that I've never sought a promotion. Let's put it that way. I believe that there's some foundational pieces that success is made of, and that's not necessarily seeking the next position. For me, that means working hard, having fun, having a positive attitude, right, and taking care of people. And very generally, when I say taking care of people, I mean taking care of your bosses, taking care of those who work for you, taking care of the people who depend on you, families, etc., right? And so if you work hard and you dedicate yourself to what is most important to you and most important to the success of any organization, be it military or otherwise, if you bring a positive attitude to what you do every day and you genuinely have a mindset of taking care of people, that combination has served me very well. I've been trying to prove that mantra wrong for the last 15 years and failed miserably at proving that wrong. So I think I'll keep after it. And so that has meant different levels, different rank promotions, different levels of responsibility, all the way to the opportunity to be a commanding officer of a squadron, which is in the Air Force is a pretty significant leadership responsibility, typically hundreds of people with a a pretty important mission. Had the opportunity to do that before moving to the Pentagon, and so it's served me very well.
Well, you mentioned having a positive attitude is the most important thing, especially when balancing family and all of this. How do you do that when you have this nation's security on your shoulders?
Yeah, I would argue that there's no more important time, right, to maintain your optimism and maintain that positivity. That you have to look at our strategy in terms of what success looks like and then build toward that, right? There is no doubt that working in cyber operations and cyber strategy, our set of challenges and our set of complex circumstances is overwhelming, and it certainly can be at times. But you have to keep that positivity, particularly when you're in a leadership role, because those you lead depend on you to paint the picture of optimism. General Colin Powell is famous for saying that optimism is a force multiplier, right? And that is certainly the case. You can produce positivity and produce positive effects where none existed simply by the attitude that you bring to the challenges that you face.
Now, is that positive attitude something ingrained in the organizational culture of the military? Are there different mantras, as you said, in different sects of the military? Or is it generally trying to accomplish what you've said?
I don't know. I mean, certainly, we receive a lot of leadership training and guidance, and you have the opportunity to develop your own style as a leader. And so certainly positivity is included in there, right? And optimism is included in the lessons that you can see looking back in history at how successful leaders of both military organizations and businesses and everything else were able to achieve what some thought to be impossible outcomes just through a positive mindset, right? And so while it's not necessarily ingrained as a checklist item that you need to do, I think most leaders, and many that I've encountered in the military, see that as an ingredient that is necessary for success, right? And so just as I've inculcated it into my own kind of leadership style and the mantra that I bring to leadership situations, I think many have. And it's something that I do think you find in the military and in our culture.
What are your current duties, or some of them at least, that you can talk about as chief of the cyber strategy branch?
Yeah, absolutely. So, wow, right? I never really anticipated that I'd be in the Pentagon writing cyber strategy for the United States Air Force. When I graduated from the University of Redlands, cyberspace was kind of a new thing, right? We were just wiring our dorms for internet access when I left here in 2001. And so it had a different meaning then, right? And I've watched the domain grow over the last 15 years serving in the Air Force. And today, our understanding of cyberspace is much different than it was then. We saw it as a technical domain, right? Something that was computer specific, very tailored, almost to the boundaries of the internet, defined cyberspace, right? Today, our understanding of cyberspace includes the information environment, the information that flows across all of the different lines and is stored in different aspects of cyberspace. It involves the cognitive component, how people interpret information and use that to make decisions, right? And so that entire environment is now cyberspace. And when you also put it into the larger context of intergovernmental relations, international relations, sociology, it is a component of who we are as a global society now. And so as we're writing cyberspace strategy, we're not writing it in isolation, cyber for the sake of cyber, I say. We're writing cyberspace strategy as it impacts the larger, really society of people, right, and governments and capabilities. And so our component is nested in the larger Department of Defense mission set. We look at how cyberspace impacts our ability to fly airplanes and deliver humanitarian aid around the world and execute the United States of America's strategies with regard to air power through cyberspace, in and through cyberspace.
Have you noticed now with this new administration, have you noticed any differences between the previous and current administrations when it comes to national defense strategy?
Certainly. I think with any transition of leadership, you're going to see and note differences, right? And so with our current administration coming in, we are seeing them get their feet under them. They've started to appoint the new cabinet positions. We have a new Secretary of Defense in Secretary Mattis, and we have the new service secretaries are starting to take root. And so we anticipate that there will be change within the Department of Defense, just as there is with any change in administration. And the policies of the most senior executive levels will work their way into the department, and they will impact how we do things. And now, fundamentally, we are a pretty stable institution by design. You don't want too much of a radical shift, I think, within a sector like defense, just given the fact that we have international relations and everything else associated with that. And so I certainly don't anticipate that, but I'm also in a position where we execute the orders of the President of the United States per our oath of office, and we continue that way. So we have certainly noted an atmospheric change, but I think it's consistent with any change in administration that you would see.
Just stay right there. We'll be right back with more Inside the Studio right after this. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Inside the Studio. I'm Evan Sanford, and still with us is Lieutenant Colonel Billy Pope, who works at the Pentagon and gave a lecture on campus entitled, "Will the Next War Be a Cyber War?" Do you think that cyber threats are a greater concern than any facing our country?
I'm actually one who cages cyber vulnerabilities and cyber threats in the larger context of international relations and the threats that a nation state faces. Certainly they're significant. But I don't think you can consider them in isolation. I don't think it's necessarily the largest threat that we face as a nation when you look at all of the entire spectrum of challenges that we face. But it's also not one that we can ignore. Cyberspace and cyber power produces power where none previously existed. It produces power in different ways. And so a nation state, particularly the more powerful ones on the face of the planet, are not going to stand by idly and allow their power, their sovereignty to be eroded via cyberspace. They're going to use the domain to their advantage and create capabilities that further enhance their power. And so while we certainly face a significant challenge with regard to cybersecurity, we have experts who are getting their arms around that challenge, working on it every single day to develop solutions to keep us safe. And so as you see it being a prevalent issue that the government faces and acknowledges on an almost daily basis at this point, that's recognition that folks take this seriously, and that we are developing capabilities and security mechanisms by which we can protect our nation. So again, it's a significant challenge, but it's not one that we can't overcome as a nation.
What was the message you were trying to convey in your speech?
So I think there's a realization now that the core of our nation is dependent upon cyberspace. Things that we never anticipated. Our economic sector, for example, is completely dependent upon cyberspace in order to function correctly. International conglomerates and organizations that do manufacturing of components are dependent upon cyberspace for just-in-time delivery of components and for cataloging the needs for different pieces and parts in order to keep their manufacturing chains running as they should. All the way down to fast food restaurants are dependent upon computers in order to track inventory and everything else. And so when you put these together, you realize that our society can't function as a society should without cyberspace, right? But at the same time, these technologies that underpin all of these critical capabilities were designed in an era where we did not have a maneuvering adversary in this space. They were designed to work in an open and trusting environment. The protocols that are used to underpin the internet, for example, were designed in the 60s and 70s and have continued today with security kind of bolted on as an afterthought. But in many ways they're inherently insecure, right? And so when you take this insecure technology and you couple it with our dependence upon that, now you're dependent upon something in which you're very vulnerable. And so that dependence and vulnerability is kind of a tough situation, right? And so that's where power really changes, right? Our ability to use that inherent advantage in our relations with other nations, but also realizing that we need to change the ways we do things and build insecurity in order to overcome that piece.
Now, let's talk about how you ended up at the University of Redlands. And what was your major, your involvements?
I think that's a fantastic segue, actually. So I was a computer science major, right? And when there was a bachelor's of science in computer science here. And when I showed up at the University of Redlands as a computer science major, I was among a small cohort at a liberal arts school focusing on a very technical subject, right? That combination has actually proven itself to be hugely important in the course of my life. The fact that I was studying something very technical, but surrounded by a university community that focused on sociological problems, governmental problems, art problems, all of these different types of things shape the environment in which we live. And so fast forward 15 years, and that combination has been hugely important, right? Now we realize that cyberspace is a part of a larger global context, and it's a sociological issue. And so that foundation was instrumental.
What were your involvements? Were you in a fraternity or did you play sports?
Yeah, I did. I was a baseball player, not a very good one, but a baseball player for 4 years nonetheless. And so that was, really it taught me a lot. The athletic field, the lessons that are learned there have translated very well into my military career. There is a lot to be said for learning the stresses of sport and then taking that into very serious business of national defense. Beyond that, I was certainly involved in social activities and things like that around the campus, and then involved with classwork. But I'd say the baseball team, I have a group of brothers, right, who I continue to keep in touch with today, who are pretty important in my life.
Is Kelsey Myers one of them?
Oh, he is my brother from another mother.
He was on this show.
Yeah, that's right.
And he said you let a triple go. Is this?
Oh no! Here we go. Here we go.
Because I heard
stories.
This is a decade and a half of back and forth. I heard.
That's funny. No, so I would lay blame for that triple squarely on the shoulders of Mr. Kelsey Myers.
Okay, very
and
interesting.
Let the record reflect that was all his fault, regardless of what fictitious stories he may have told you at another time in another interview.
Okay, no, he didn't say it in an interview, so there's no record of it.
Oh, okay.
But it was brought up and suggested that I bring it up to you.
I may have been responsible for a lot of triples and even probably more home runs as a pitcher against our team. That one in particular that he is referring to, I will not take credit for.
Okay, fair enough. We'll move on. Looking back at your time in Redlands, is there any specific moment you can point to that kind of cemented in your mind that you wanted to go into active military service?
Well, certainly. I think there's a couple. First of all, like I said, I came here on an ROTC scholarship, and so
what is ROTC?
It's the Reserve Officer Training Corps. So the U.S. government allows college students to go to a quote unquote normal university, not one of the service academies or another aspect like that. You go to a typical college, yet at the same time you take classes. I took mine a combination of University of Southern California and UCSB over in San Bernardino. And so I took the military classes in conjunction with my normal coursework here at Redlands. And then the Air Force paid for my tuition while I was here in exchange for 4 years of service on the other end, right? But I graduated from U of R in May of 2001. And we know that the world changed significantly in September of 2001. So the attacks of September 11th certainly changed my course, right? I joined a quote-unquote peacetime military, and then very quickly found ourselves engaged in a global war. And so for the last 15 years, that's been the military environment and the national security environment that I've lived in. Is there one particular moment here at the university that kind of led into that? I would say probably a couple of months beyond graduation. But again, it's that combination of coursework and computer science that put things together, the liberal arts foundation, as well as you brought up all the experiences with the baseball team. And that is not to be taken lightly. That was a very serious part of the development. Putting all those things together really did kind of set me up for success, I believe, in the military.
Are there any words of advice that you might have for a student now considering a life in military service?
Yeah, absolutely. The adventure, the opportunity to be a part of something larger than yourself. It's almost cliche to hear that today, but it's certainly true. There are, particularly in the sciences, STEM sciences or technical backgrounds, engineering, mathematics. We have a larger need than we have supply. And so if folks are particularly interested in the sciences, there are opportunities in the military that would be, they would be met well. Words of advice, I think the way that you carry yourself in college and the things that you do are going to lead well into the military. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for being here. This is a real pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's all the time we have for the program today. My thanks to Lieutenant Colonel Billy Pope for being on the program, and thank you as well for tuning in. Until next time, I'm Evan Sanford, and this is Inside the Studio. We'll see you soon.